Commander Kim Tae rubbed his tired eyes as he stared at the glowing screens in the deep space monitoring station. For 3 days, the same strange object had been drifting through their sector, and nobody could figure out what it was. The night shift was always quiet, but tonight felt different. "Sir, you need to see this," called Dr. Park High from across the dark control room. Her voice carried an excitement that cut through the usual boredom of deep space duty. Kim walked over to her station, where holographic displays showed detailed scans of the mysterious object. "What am I looking at, Park?" "It's definitely artificial," she said, pointing to the rotating 3D image. "But look at this construction. Basic metal plates welded together. Primitive fusion engine that barely works. Whoever built this thing had no idea what they were doing." Lieutenant Lee Jun leaned over from his console nearby. "Commander, the really weird part is these markings we found on the hull. There are numbers, star maps, and these strange pictures of creatures with 2 arms and 2 legs. Kim studied the images more carefully. The vessel looked like something a child might build with scrap metal. Rough welding marks showed where pieces had been joined together. The engine design was so simple it seemed almost comical compared to the advanced ships the Galactic Council used. "How big is it?" Kim asked. "About 40 meters long," Park replied. "Big enough for maybe a dozen crew members, but the life support systems are so basic, they could only survive a few years in space." "Another dead civilization," sighed Kim. This was the part of deep space monitoring he hated most. Every few months, they would find evidence of some species that had tried to reach the stars before they were ready. Usually, all that remained were empty ships drifting through the void, carrying the hopes and dreams of people who would never see another world. Lee pulled up more images on his screen. "Sir, these metal plates they left behind tell a story. Simple drawings showing their planet, their sun, and basic math. They were trying to communicate with whoever found their ship. The drawings were crude but touching. Stick figures representing the creatures who built the ship. Pictures of their world showing continents and oceans. Mathematical symbols that any spacefaring civilization would understand. It was like a message in a bottle thrown into the cosmic ocean." "Where did it come from?" Kim asked. Park worked on her computer for several minutes, tracing the ship's path backward through space. Based on its trajectory and speed, it launched from a yellow star system about 50 light-years from here. There's a small planet in the right zone for life, but our long-range scans show no signs of advanced civilization. "So they're all dead," Kim said quietly. "Most likely," Park agreed. "This ship has been traveling for decades. Even if some survived on their homeworld, they probably never developed beyond basic technology. This was probably their last desperate attempt to contact other intelligent life." Kim looked at the primitive vessel on his screen and felt a familiar sadness. Somewhere out there, an entire species had looked up at the stars and dreamed of meeting others like themselves. They had built this simple ship with whatever materials they could find, loaded it with their best attempt at communication, and sent it into the darkness hoping someone would find it and know they had existed. "The engineering is actually quite clever," admitted Lee, studying the technical scans. "They solved a lot of problems with very limited resources. Their fuel system is inefficient but reliable. The navigation computer is basic but accurate. For a primitive species, they showed real intelligence." Park nodded in agreement. "They managed to achieve interstellar flight using only materials from their own solar system. That's actually impressive. Most species need help from more advanced civilizations to make that jump. But not impressive enough to save them," Kim said. "No, sir. The outer rim is full of failed attempts like this. Species that tried to explore space before they were technologically ready. It's one of the sad realities of galactic evolution." Kim stared at the lonely ship on his display. Somewhere, perhaps decades ago, beings not unlike themselves had gathered around this vessel before its launch. They had probably said prayers or made speeches. Maybe families had watched as their bravest explorers climbed aboard for a journey they knew was likely one way. "What's our standard procedure for something like this?" asked Lee. "Archaeological classification," Park answered. "We catalog everything, preserve the artifacts, and file a report with the Galactic Council. Maybe someday xenoarchaeologists will study their culture and learn something about how primitive civilizations develop. Should we investigate their homeworld? Lee suggested. Kim considered this. Council policy is to survey any planet where we find evidence of extinct intelligent life. But this system is pretty remote. It would take resources we don't have. I'll file the paperwork anyway, Park said. You never know what the Science Council might approve for study. As the night shift continued, Kim found himself looking back at the primitive ship again and again. Something about it bothered him, though he couldn't put his finger on what. The construction was crude, yes, but there was something purposeful about its design. Something that suggested more thought had gone into it than appeared at first glance. But tired eyes often saw patterns that weren't really there. Kim shook his head and returned to his other duties, filing the mysterious vessel away as just another tragic reminder of how dangerous space could be for species that reached for the stars too soon. Dr. Choi Min-ho arrived at the monitoring station 2 days after receiving the urgent message about the mysterious vessel. As the Galactic Council's top expert on extinct civilizations, he had seen hundreds of failed attempts at interstellar travel. But something about this case had caught his attention. "Show me everything," he said to Commander Kim as they walked through the station's analysis lab. Dr. Park High pulled up the holographic displays showing the primitive ship from every angle. The vessel is definitely old-style construction. Basic, fusion drive, simple navigation systems. But the trajectory data is what makes this interesting. She manipulated the display to show a star map with a glowing line indicating the ship's path through space. It came from this yellow star system here. Single habitable planet in the right zone for life. Choi studied the map carefully. How far? 47 parsecs rimward, answered Lieutenant Lee Jun. Pretty remote area. Not many ships travel through that sector. What do we know about the origin system? Park worked at her console, bringing up long-range sensor data. 1 yellow star, 8 planets total. The third planet shows biological signatures consistent with a living world. Lots of water, oxygen atmosphere, active weather patterns. Any signs of civilization? That's the strange part, Park said, frowning at her readings. We detect some electromagnetic emissions, but they're very weak. Radio signals. Basic electronics at most. Nothing that suggests spacefaring technology. Choi walked around the holographic display of the primitive vessel, examining it from different angles. So we have a species that managed to build an interstellar ship, but their homeworld shows no signs of advanced technology. Exactly, Kim said. It doesn't add up. Either they all died out after launching this ship, or they never had much technology to begin with. Lieutenant Lee pulled up the metal plates they had recovered from the vessel. Dr. Choi, you should see these communication attempts. Simple drawings, mathematical sequences, star charts. They were definitely trying to make contact with other intelligent life. The images were touching in their simplicity. Stick figures representing the builders, pictures of their solar system with their home planet clearly marked. Basic mathematical concepts that any space-traveling species would understand. But what caught Choi's attention was the level of detail in the star charts. These navigation maps are quite accurate, he observed. They show not just their own system, but several neighboring star systems as well. That suggests fairly sophisticated astronomical observation. Maybe they were better scientists than engineers, suggested Park. Choi continued studying the data, but something nagged at him. In his experience, species that could create accurate star maps usually had the technology to build better ships than this crude vessel. The two didn't match. What's Council policy on situations like this? Asked Kim. Standard first contact protocol. Choi replied. We investigate any system where we find evidence of intelligent life, active or extinct. Even if they're gone, we can learn valuable information about how civilizations develop. But this system is pretty far out, Kim pointed out. It would take significant resources to mount a proper survey mission. That's for the Council to decide. My job is to make recommendations based on the evidence. Park brought up more technical analysis of the ship's construction. Dr. Choi, there's something else you should know. This vessel shows some surprisingly clever engineering solutions. The fuel efficiency is much better than we'd expect from such primitive technology. How so? They figured out how to extend their fusion fuel supply by recycling waste products back into the reaction chamber. It's not something we'd normally see from a species at this technological level. Lee nodded in agreement. The life support systems are also more efficient than they appear. Simple. But they would work reliably for years with minimal maintenance. Choi found this information troubling. So we have a species smart enough to solve complex engineering problems, but primitive enough that their homeworld shows no signs of advanced technology? Maybe they put all their resources into this one ship, suggested Kim, a last desperate attempt before their civilization collapsed. Or maybe they're still there, but hiding their true capabilities, said Park quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. What do you mean? Asked Choi. Think about it. If you were a primitive species and you detected advanced civilizations in your galactic neighborhood, would you advertise your presence? Or would you be careful about revealing your true technological level? That's an interesting theory, Choi admitted. But why send out a ship at all if you're trying to stay hidden? Maybe this wasn't meant to be found by accident, Park said. Maybe it was meant to be found by us specifically. A way to make contact while appearing less threatening. Kim shook his head. That seems too sophisticated for a primitive species. Does it? Park asked. We know they're good at solving problems with limited resources. We know they're excellent astronomers. And we know they understand the basics of interstellar communication. Why couldn't they be smart enough to plan a careful first contact? Hoang stood silently for several minutes processing this possibility. In all his years studying extinct civilizations, he had never encountered a case quite like this one. Usually the evidence was clear-cut. Species either had the technology for interstellar travel or they didn't. But this case had contradictions that didn't fit normal patterns. I'm recommending a full survey mission, he finally announced. We need to know what's really happening in that system. You think they might still be alive? Asked Lee. I think we don't have enough information to make assumptions either way, and that's exactly why we need to investigate. As Choi prepared his report for the Galactic Council, he couldn't shake the feeling that this primitive vessel might represent something entirely new in their experience with developing civilizations. Survey team leader Gang So-young stared at her instrument panel in complete disbelief. For the third time in 10 minutes, she ran the sensor sweeps of the blue-green planet below them. Each scan gave the same impossible results. This can't be right, she muttered to herself. Ma'am? Asked her pilot Nam Ho-jin from the front seat of their small survey craft. Run a full diagnostic on all sensors, Gang ordered. Something must be wrong with our equipment. Nam worked quickly at his controls while intelligence specialist Jang Mi-rae looked up from her analysis station with confusion written across her face. Commander, I've checked everything twice. Our instruments are working perfectly. Gang looked out the viewport at the planet spinning slowly below them. According to their mission briefing, this world should have been primitive at best, possibly even lifeless. Instead, her sensors showed something that made no sense at all. Tell me what you're seeing, Mi-rae, Gang said quietly. Massive urban centers on every continent, hundreds of cities with populations in the millions, advanced transportation networks connecting them. And Mi-rae paused, double-checking her readings. Orbital installations, lots of them. Nam finished his diagnostic and turned around. All systems are functioning normally, Commander. Whatever we're detecting down there is real. Gang felt a cold knot forming in her stomach. What kind of orbital installations? Space stations, manufacturing facilities, what appears to be a large construction project near their moon. And Commander, Mi-rae's voice dropped to almost a whisper. I'm detecting organized military installations across the planet's surface. Military? Gang's voice cracked slightly. Missile silos, radar installations, defensive positions. This isn't a primitive civilization, Commander. This is an active, advanced military power. Gang stared at the peaceful-looking world below them. White clouds swirled over blue oceans and green continents. It looked so beautiful and harmless from space. But her instruments told a very different story. How advanced are we talking? She asked, Nam checked his scanners. Nuclear capabilities, definitely. Sophisticated satellite networks in orbit. And I'm detecting multiple spacecraft moving between the planet and their moon. Spacecraft? Gang's heart rate increased. What kind? Small craft, but they're using some kind of efficient propulsion system. Nothing like our quantum drives, but effective for local space travel. Gang tried to make sense of what they were seeing. According to their information, the primitive vessel they had found was supposed to represent this species at their most advanced level. But the planet below showed technology far beyond anything that crude ships suggested. "Commander," Mireille said urgently, "I'm picking up electromagnetic communications, lots of them. Radio, television, data transmissions. This civilization is very active. Can you understand any of it?" "Some of it. Basic mathematical concepts, scientific data. But most of it appears to be in their native languages, which we haven't decoded yet." Gang made a decision. "Maintain maximum stealth protocols. Passive sensors only. I don't want to risk detection until we understand what we're dealing with." Over the next several hours, they continued their careful observation of the planet. The more they learned, the more disturbing the picture became. This wasn't a primitive species struggling to survive. This was a thriving, technologically advanced civilization that had somehow remained hidden from galactic awareness. "I'm detecting what appears to be industrial manufacturing on a massive scale," reported Mireille. "Chemical processing, metallurgy, electronics production. They're making everything they need right here on their homeworld." "That's unusual," Nam observed. "Most civilizations depend on trade with other worlds for advanced materials." "These people seem completely self-sufficient," Gang agreed. "They're not importing anything from off-world because they don't have any off-world contacts." "Commander," Mireille said, studying her analysis screens, "I think I understand what happened. That primitive ship we found wasn't their best effort. It was designed to look primitive." "What do you mean?" "Look at the construction techniques I'm detecting on the planet's surface. Advanced manufacturing, sophisticated material science, complex engineering projects. They're capable of much better work than that crude vessel suggested." Gang felt the pieces clicking together in her mind. "You're saying they deliberately made their ship look primitive?" "I think so. If you wanted to make first contact with advanced alien civilizations, but you weren't sure how they'd react to competition, wouldn't you want to appear less threatening?" Nam turned around in his seat. "That would explain why their homeworld shows such advanced technology while their space vessel looked so crude. But why make contact at all if they wanted to stay hidden?" Gang asked. "Maybe they didn't want to stay hidden forever," Mireille suggested. "Maybe they wanted to test our reactions. Send out a probe that looked harmless and see how we responded." Gang stared at the planet below them with growing unease. "You're suggesting this entire species has been watching us while we thought they were extinct?" "It's possible. They clearly have the technology for space observation, and they've had decades to study our response to their probe." "Commander," Nam said quietly, "if this species has been planning first contact this carefully, what does that say about their intentions?" Gang didn't answer immediately. She was thinking about the implications of what they had discovered. A civilization that could disguise its true capabilities while secretly studying potential alien contacts was far more sophisticated than anything in their experience. "We need to report this immediately," she finally said. "The Galactic Council needs to know that we're not dealing with primitives. We're dealing with a species that's been preparing for contact on their own terms." As their ship turned away from the planet to begin the journey back to Council space, Gang took one last look at the deceptively peaceful world below. Somewhere down there, an entire civilization was probably watching them leave, just as they had been watching. Emergency Session Chair Baek Jin-woo called the Galactic Council meeting to order with unusual urgency. The massive chamber buzzed with worried conversations as representatives from dozens of worlds took their seats. News of the survey team's discovery had spread quickly through the council networks, causing panic among the leadership. "Dr. Shin Ye-jin will present her analysis of the human situation," Jin-woo announced, his voice carrying across the silent chamber. Dr. Shin stood at the central podium, her normally calm demeanor replaced by visible tension. As the Council's leading expert on alien psychology, she had spent the past week studying all available data about this mysterious species. "Fellow Council members," she began, "after careful analysis of the evidence, we have reached a disturbing conclusion about the beings who call themselves humans." She activated the holographic display, showing the primitive vessel that had started everything. This ship was not a desperate attempt by a dying civilization. It was a carefully planned reconnaissance mission. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the assembly. Representative Park So-min from the outer colonies raised her hand. "Dr. Shin, are you suggesting this primitive vessel was intentionally designed to appear crude?" "Exactly," Shin replied. "The construction was deliberate camouflage. Every aspect of this ship was calculated to make us underestimate their true capabilities while they gathered intelligence about our response protocols." Strategic analyst Moon Chang-ho joined her at the podium. "We've identified several key factors that make humans unlike any species we've encountered. First, they achieved interstellar capability through pure innovation, using only resources from their home system." "What does that mean for us?" asked Representative Kim Hyun-woo from the Core Worlds. "It means they're completely self-sufficient," Moon explained. "Every other civilization in our galaxy was discovered while still primitive. We guided their technological development through controlled trade relationships. We made them dependent on our resources and expertise." Military advisor An Soo-jin stepped forward. "But humans developed in complete isolation. They don't need our technology, our materials, or our guidance. They solved every technological challenge through internal innovation." The implications began sinking in among the assembled representatives. For thousands of years, the Galactic Council had maintained peace by ensuring that all civilizations remained interconnected through trade. No single world could survive independently, which prevented conflicts and maintained stability. "Dr. Shin," called out Representative Lee Dong-hyuk, "what does this mean for galactic security?" Shin's expression grew even more serious. "We're dealing with a species that has never learned dependence. Throughout their development, they faced every challenge alone. This has maintained their warrior instincts and drive for complete self-reliance." She changed the holographic display to show intercepted human communications. The mathematical constants and star charts on their vessel weren't just scientific data, they were a declaration. They were telling us they've mapped our entire galactic neighborhood, and they're ready for contact as equals, not subjects. "Equals?" Representative Oh Min-jung looked shocked. "No species enters galactic civilization as equals. They all start as junior members under our guidance. That's exactly the problem," Moon said grimly. "Humans aren't asking for permission to join our civilization. They're announcing their intention to claim their place in it." Council Leader Ryu Haiwan leaned forward in his elevated seat. "What evidence supports this theory?" Dr. Shin brought up new data on the display. "Our psychological analysis of human behavior patterns shows several concerning traits. They're highly competitive, suspicious of outside control, and they respond to challenges by becoming stronger rather than seeking help. They also show remarkable adaptability," added on. "Every obstacle in their development made them more innovative, not more dependent. Where other species would have sought assistance, humans developed new solutions." Representative Yoon Da-eun raised a troubling question. "If they've been planning this contact so carefully, what else might they have prepared?" The chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. If humans had spent decades preparing for first contact while appearing primitive, what other capabilities might they be hiding? "There's more," Shin said quietly. "Analysis of their cultural transmissions shows they have detailed knowledge of conflict resolution, strategic planning, and resource management on a planetary scale. They've been unified as a species for longer than most civilizations achieve before joining the Council." "Unified how?" asked Jin Woo. "They've eliminated most internal conflicts through diplomatic and economic cooperation. But they've maintained their competitive edge by directing it outward, toward challenges like space exploration and technological advancement." Moon activated additional displays showing human technological progression. Their rate of development has been accelerating. In the time since they launched their probe, they've advanced their capabilities dramatically. They're not just catching up to galactic standards. In some areas, they're developing entirely new approaches. What kind of approaches? Representative Park asked nervously. Technologies that don't require exotic materials or external resources, Han explained. While we've become dependent on rare elements and complex trade networks, humans have learned to achieve similar results using common materials and innovative engineering. Dr. Shin concluded her presentation with a final, chilling observation. Fellow council members, we must understand what we're facing. Every other species in our galaxy needed our help to reach the stars. Humans reached them alone. Every other civilization joined us seeking protection and resources. Humans are coming to us as competitors. The vessel they sent wasn't a plea for help, she continued. It was a warning. They were telling us, we know you exist. We know where you are, and we're coming to meet you on our terms. As the full implications settled over the assembly, Council Leader Ryu stood slowly. The question before us now is simple. How do we respond to a species that refuses to accept a subordinate position in galactic civilization? The chamber remained silent as hundreds of representatives contemplated a problem they had never faced before, dealing with true equals. 3 weeks had passed since the emergency council session, and the galaxy's leaders were still debating how to handle the human situation when emergency alert specialist Han Min-soo burst through the doors of the council chambers. His face was pale with fear, and his hand shook as he carried his urgent report. Council leaders, he called out breathlessly. Priority alert from all monitoring stations in the Sol system. Council leader Ryu Haiwan looked up sharply from his discussion with the other senior members. What's the situation, Han? Long-range sensors are detecting massive activity from the human homeworld. Multiple launches detected over the past 72 hours. These aren't small probe ships like the first one. The chamber quickly filled with worried voices as representatives demanded more information. Dr. Shin Ye-jin stood from her seat with growing alarm. How many vessels are we talking about? Han checked his data pad with trembling fingers. 23 confirmed launches so far, with more being prepared. Preliminary analysis suggests these are full-scale interstellar vessels with advanced propulsion systems far beyond what we expected. The room fell completely silent. Strategic Defense Coordinator Ko Yun-ha activated the main tactical display, showing a map of local galactic space. Show us their trajectories. Han uploaded his data to the main system, and red lines began appearing on the star map. Each line represented a human vessel heading toward different sectors of known galactic civilization. The pattern was clearly planned and systematic. They're not heading to one location, observed military advisor An Soo-jin, with growing dread. They're spreading out across multiple star systems. This looks like an invasion force, finished Representative Park So-min, her voice barely above a whisper. Not an invasion, corrected Dr. Shin, studying the trajectory patterns more carefully. This is an introduction. They're making contact with multiple civilizations simultaneously. Representative Kim Hyun-woo stood up quickly. We need to warn the affected systems immediately. Warn them of what? Asked Council Leader Ryu. That a new species is coming to meet them? We don't even know their intentions. Han cleared his throat, nervously. Sir, there's more. Our deep space monitors have intercepted human communications during these launches. Basic translation indicates they're calling this operation First Contact Protocol. Strategic analyst Moon Chang-ho pulled up additional data on his personal display. The timing is significant. They waited until they were certain we had discovered their homeworld and understood their capabilities. Now they're making their move. What kind of move? Demanded Representative Lee Dong-hyuk. They're not waiting for our permission anymore, Dr. Shin said grimly. For weeks we've been debating how to handle them, whether to make official contact, what terms to offer. Meanwhile, they've been preparing to contact us and everyone else on their own terms. Ko Yun-ha highlighted several destinations on the tactical map. Look at these target systems. They're not random. They've selected major trade centers, military installations, and population centers. They know exactly where our important locations are. How could they know that? Asked Representative Oh Min-jung. The same way they knew everything else, replied Moon. They've been watching us for much longer than we realized. That primitive probe wasn't their first attempt at gathering intelligence. It was just the first one we found. The implications were staggering. While the Galactic Council had spent decades assuming they were the dominant force in their region of space, an entire civilization had been quietly studying them, learning their weaknesses, and preparing for contact when they felt ready. What's their estimated arrival time at the nearest system? Asked Ryuhan consulted his data. Based on their current speed and trajectory, the first human vessels will reach Centauri Station in approximately 6 standard cycles. 6 cycles? An looked shocked. That's impossible. Even our fastest ships take 12 cycles to reach Centauri. From their system. Apparently, their propulsion technology is more advanced than we estimated, Han replied. They're not using quantum drives like us, but whatever they've developed is surprisingly efficient. Dr. Shin stood and addressed the entire assembly. Fellow representatives, we need to accept the reality of our situation. The age of controlled integration is over. Humanity has announced they're ready to claim their place among the stars, and they're not asking for our approval. But we can't just let them dictate terms, protested Representative Yoon Da-un. The Council has maintained galactic stability for thousands of years. By controlling species while they were still primitive, Shin pointed out. But humans developed beyond our reach. They're entering galactic civilization as technological equals with complete independence. Council leader Ryu stood slowly, the weight of the decision visible on his face. We have 2 choices. We can try to maintain our position of authority and risk conflict with a species that clearly thrives on challenge and innovation. Or, prompted Ko Yun-ha, or we accept that everything is about to change. We prepare to welcome humanity as true partners rather than subjects and hope they're interested in cooperation rather than conquest. As alarms began sounding throughout the Council station, indicating more human vessels launching from their homeworld, the assembled leaders realized the truth that had been staring them in the face all along. That crude little ship drifting through space hadn't been the desperate attempt of a dying civilization. It hadn't been a plea for help or guidance from more advanced beings. It had been humanity's declaration of independence, and their formal announcement that they were coming to claim their rightful place in galactic civilization, whether the galaxy was ready for them or not. The warning had been delivered, understood, and now it was time to see what humanity really wanted from the stars.